Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, my business partner, the handsome, I don't know. You know,
what do I owe you? What do you owe me? What have you done? What have you broken? Joshua, just tell me the truth. What have you broken?
I feel as if...
I won't be mad. I won't be. Just need the truth.
I feel as if every time we start this, you know, I have to introduce you in some new way that's fun and different and exciting. And I hit a wall. I hit handsome, and I said, how do you get better than that? He's a handsome man.
It's never. You've peaked. You've troughed for years, but you finally peaked.
It doesn't take me long to peak, if we're being honest here. And
I was spelling it with two E's.
Jason, I've been on the road for a week, and this is the first time. Actually, I've been on the road for a week, but then I was on the road for about 5 days before this week. And I know we saw each other one time in the middle of that, but it really feels as if it's been forever since we've hung out and seen one another's faces and had a conversation. So welcome back. It's good to hang.
I'm just curious. Mm-hmm. Am I fulfilling the Meg Ryan role here or the Tom Hanks role here?
You've got mail. Did I do the right one?
I was thinking Sleepless in Seattle, but I always think Sleepless in Seattle, to be honest with you.
I don't remember either of those movies.
Oh, Sleepless in Seattle, so good. I just talked to Greg Schwartz about this on Friday. There are not this movie, but the idea that, and we all know this, there are movies that if you pass by them on the TV, you will stop and you will watch the whole thing, no matter where it is in the movie. You will do that. So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Oh yeah,
is one of mine, right?
Yep.
Sleepless in Seattle is one of mine. Mm-hmm. I absolutely adore that movie.
So I'm with you on So I Married an Axe Murderer. And I think that I would be with you on When Harry Met Sally.
That's another one of mine. Yep, that's another one. Love that movie.
But for me, the movies that come...
she's having.
Yeah, exactly, right? But for me, the movies that come to mind are Forget Paris. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, basketball. He's a basketball referee.
Yes.
Wow.
Right? And that's...
I tell you, how many years in, you still surprise me.
And that's the one with the father who, you know, was losing it, and they'd be driving down the road, and he'd have to read every billboard. Said, "You want it? You got it. Toyota." It was just so brilliantly done. So Forget Paris is one that
We've discussed this before. This is coming back to me because I made the comment that I do that with fuel prices, and I get royally made fun of for identifying all fuel prices. I think it's a very typical dad move is to say that one's a cent cheaper. You know, like, oh, I wish I hadn't got it back there. This one's 2 cents cheaper a gallon. Got to hand in my dad card. So yeah, I definitely am a reader of those billboards pricing. I'm old.
We are old. Yeah.
Anyway. What have you been up to? Because I know you have been busy and we wanted to catch up on wax. And so I'm eager to hear what you've been up to.
Well, let's see. I was the first week of Chicago. Sorry. That's funny. The first week of Chicago, I was in November.
I'll have what he's having.
The first week of November, I was in Chicago with our friend Kevin Obis, who is Impex's Pacific Northwest guy, but he also handles Illinois.
Checks out. Neighboring state. Makes perfect sense.
Hey, listen.
Yep. And anybody overseas have a little look at a map right now. Have a little look at what that territory is.
Listen,
Washington, Oregon, Illinois. Classic.
Before I was the national guy, I was the Northeast and Illinois. So, it's a pattern. So spent some good time there. I was at the Indie Spirits show, Dave Schmier's show. And it was just really nice to be out and in front of people again and being in an environment that seemed semi-normal. Granted, masks are up, masks are down. There's that kind of... There's that moment where you go into a room and everybody has their mask on, and then eventually it comes down and everybody has their masks off until you spot someone that just seems questionable, and you're like, I'm going to put my mask back on. Thank you very much. So there was that, but I'll tell you, we also did an event later that week at Warehouse Liquors that was a joint Glenallachie and Single Cask Nation event. And, as all things Single Cask Nation, the event sold out in record time, 45 people. And it was so nice to see some good Chicago Nation members. Again, Debbie Samuels, right? Dan Greisen, Mike and Bonnie Nolan, Michael Bloom, the list goes on. And so that was great. And then I had a few days home, and then I was in New Jersey.
Are we in the middle of OND, Joshua?
Oh, is that it? For those listeners who don't know, OND stands for October, November, December, which are the busiest time of year for the whiskey, for the spirits industry in general, but whiskey for sure. And then this past week I was in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Massachusetts with the Milk and Honey guys, Tal Chotiner and Tomer Gorin, and spending a week with two crazy Israelis, it just made the world right. I don't think I've laughed this hard in a good long while. I absolutely loved my time with them. And I have to tell you a story here. So I'm with them for a week, and they told me, when we come to the U.S., we're here to work. And I'm a taskmaster. If you tell me you're coming to work, well, first off, you don't have to tell me you're coming to work. I'm going to put you to work. But if you tell me I'm here to work, then I'm going to make it even doubly so. So I made sure that they were working from 8 a.m. until 1 a.m. pretty much every day. And in a way, that's a good thing. But in a way, that's a bad thing because, Jason, I've been running every day of my life since January. And so... And
that's
so
like exactly 11 days away. I've been running every day of my life since January. Kind of buried the lead on that one, right? Maybe since January, I've been running every day, as opposed to I've been running every day of my life since January.
I am in control of my own narrative, of how I wield the English language. Thank you very much.
Really like a bludgeon.
And so I had these stretch of days where I couldn't get up in the morning and run comfortably, at least. And then midweek,
and you've done that every day of your life since January. I could see that really, really missing. I really see that. Uh-huh.
It was for exactly 8 days. Anyway, listeners of the podcast who remember an episode from season 1 or 2 are gonna love that one. And so I remember sometime during that week there was going to be like the Wednesday, Thursday, or the Thursday, Friday, or whatever it was, where I knew I can get a couple good runs in. And so I was looking forward to that. The night prior to the first day where I'd be able to run, we're at this festival, it's Kosher Fest, and I need to tell you a story about Kosher Fest in a second.
This story's inception. There are stories within stories within stories. Well, why don't you tell us that story? Instead of coming back to it, tell us that story now and then circle back to...
Could you spin your top?
To the main
just
story.
Just make sure you're not dreaming. Just spin your top. And so I'm looking forward to this run, but we're doing Kosher Fest, which is a trade event from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., and you're just on your feet the whole time. And my back was killing me. And I'm trying to crack my back, and I can't crack it. And so Tal says, let me try to crack your back. And so he has me put my hands behind my head, and he sort of lifts me from behind, and that didn't work. And we're with our new New York, New Jersey guy, George Summer, who is one of the funniest and fun people you will ever meet. He says, oh, you need your back cracked? I'll crack your back. Now, I'm 5'10" and a half or so.
Oh, talk about controlling your own narrative. Okay, go on. Continue.
I was for my
the
whole
purposes
life
of this
since,
conversation.
And he, I would say, is maybe 5'8", so he's a bit shorter than me. And so he says, just let me crack your back. And so he comes to me, and we're face to face, and he puts his arms around me, kind of like how I cracked Tamara's back.
This
right?
is your technique.
It's my technique.
You've done this to my wife numerous times. And I'd be asked to leave the room.
I've done it to your wife so many times.
So many times.
And
so many times. I can't even watch it anymore. I've seen it so many times.
It's like a cuck move. But anyway, and so I'm like, all right, he's going to do this the proper way. Because I know what Tal was trying to do, and that's not how my back cracks, but I know how my back cracks. And so he grabs me from the middle, and he balls his fist and he puts it in the middle of my back, and he goes to squeeze and lifts me while he squeezes, and then he rolls his fist up the spine of my back. And the problem is, he was so strong that I think he either bruised or cracked one of my ribs. I have been in excruciating pain. I can't sleep properly. I can't lift things. I can't run. I can't do sit-ups. I can't do anything. And I have a rib that's swelling. I've got a bit of bruising going on. And if you were to just, touch my ribs and just go up and down them to see how they are, one of them just seems a bit misplaced. So I broke a rib during this event. So that's
wow.
Yeah. So you asked me what I've been up to. I've been,
out here breaking ribs.
I've been breaking ribs.
Man, I thought you were going to let out a little sound or something when he gave you a wee squeeze.
Oh boy, did I give out a sound.
Another classic dad move, but no, it was a rib injury. That was unexpected.
Oh, that was rough stuff. And then I have to tell you this story really quickly.
I tell you what, though, you're thinking about your back less.
Right? That's
mission accomplished.
My back has been great ever since. So, do you remember earlier on in the podcast, seasons 1 and 2, and probably part of 3, every interview that we had, we would finish the interview off with, let's talk about common misconceptions.
Indeed,
right?
Indeed.
And there were some that I remember I thought were fantastic, like Ian Allen saying people wanted to know where they store their malt syrup because whiskey's made from a malt syrup.
I liked whiskey-colored liquid running from stills, and people are surprised when the liquid is clear.
Yes, yeah. And so, so there are these great misconceptions. And so here we are at Kosher Fest, and there was a shop owner, or a former shop owner, I should say, who came to our booth. And
are we about to find out why that's former?
Yeah, that's
What do you mean there are health codes?
And so, at the table, so this is Kosher Fest, right? So what do we have at the table?
Mm-hmm.
We have kosher certified whiskeys. So we've got M&H on one side, and we have Penderyn on the other side because some of Penderyn's whiskeys are certified. And this guy comes up to George, and he says to him, "So what are these?" And he says, "This is single malt Welsh whiskey." And he says, "Yeah, but what's the base from it? Is it like, do they just put vodka into the cask?" And he said, "Well, technically you can't put vodka into a cask and have that turn into whiskey because, spirit has to be distilled to a certain level." He said, "No, you schmuck, you're wrong." He said, "As soon as you put a liquid into a cask, it becomes whiskey." And he said, "No, sir, I don't want to correct you here, but that's not correct." And
I don't want to correct you, but I am correct.
But I'm going to correct
right now.
And he says, "Are you kidding me? I've taught classes about this. If you put vodka into a cask, that's fucking whiskey. Not only is it fucking whiskey, when you put vodka into a cask, it comes out as rye whiskey." To which George says, I'm sorry, and I'm trying to calm George down here because George can get a little wound up. And I didn't, this guy was coming in hot. This guy was like nose to nose with George, tapping him on the shoulder with his finger like, "You're a schmuck. You're a fucking schmuck. And you're a blah, blah, blah." And then he goes on, he says, "Anything you put into cask is whiskey. Cognac is whiskey."
Am I? Oh my God, we're back to Inception again. Like, where's the top? I need the spinning top.
And George said,
"Oh my Lord."
And he said, "Well, no, cognac is a protected spirit that's made from grapes. Whiskey has to be made from grain." And I'm like, and I really thought, like, all of this happened so quickly, so rapid fire, that I thought what was going on is they were having just a bit of fun with one another because it got a little loud and it got a little heated. And then I realized this guy was being dead serious. And he was going on about how he would run seminars and he would be teaching people about how whiskey was made and what was whiskey and what wasn't whiskey and how it can or cannot be classified. And this conversation gets over, but it reminded me of how important this question of what are some of the common misconceptions you hear, because you have actual schmucks miseducating people on what is and what cannot be called whiskey. Cognac is whiskey.
Words.
Vodka in a cask is rye whiskey.
That's the most what did we always say with the misconception bit? Look, we're not looking to throw anybody under the bus. We're not looking to make anybody feel small. We're not looking to embarrass anybody. We're just, oftentimes these come from a place of truth.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yep.
In this moment, I got nothing. Like, this just sounds like literal crazy talk. Like you take straw and you run it through a spinning wheel and you spin gold. Like, okay, Rumpelstiltskin, calm down. Like, settle down. Like, and then added on top of it, this person was in charge of running seminars.
Yeah, and so after that was done and he left, there was another person there who knew of him, and she had said, "Oh, you were talking to so and so? Oh gosh, he's the schmuck. He's been divorced 4 times. He lost his shop. This, that, and the other thing." Like, oh yeah, that all makes sense. That all makes sense. And so,
wow.
So you asked me what I've been up to. This is what I've been up to.
That's so mental. My head is spinning from that. Oh, gosh. Well, so let me just say this quickly. I know you and I are in catch-up mode and there's a lot to talk about, but we have a guest who we're very excited to get to.
A VIP.
Just
a VIP? A very important guest.
A double VIP, triple VIP.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say, we interviewed Billy Abbott month, 6 weeks ago, however time works. And his book was coming out. I'm very pleased to say his book has come into me in Virginia. I have to send your copy on to you, Joshua. But it came in Friday afternoon. I read it Friday afternoon. And I texted Billy immediately to say, Billy, I'm 3 pages in and I'm already stealing every single word I've read so far for my next presentation. And it's so interesting that you bring up this idea of vodka going into a cask and becoming whiskey. In the beginning of the book, and I don't want to steal Billy's thunder here, but he describes whiskey in a way that, whiskey production in a way that I've never heard it described, and I absolutely loved it. But one of his things is, you've essentially made a bad quote-unquote vodka, a clear alcoholic spirit from grain, which you then put into a cask. And from that point, magic happens. But I was so excited to get my hands on the book. I so enjoyed the conversation. And over the last couple of weeks, Jess and I have been texting back and forth. With her being in the UK, she received her Billy Abbott book before us. She'd started reading it. And I think she hit the nail on the head. And I think this should be on a future cover. It's like Billy's reading the book to you. You can't not read the book in Billy's voice. And I don't mean accent, I mean the way he comports himself.
Yeah, sure.
You can't not read it with Billy in your ear. And when I read it on Friday afternoon, that was absolutely true for me. Billy's right there in your ear as you're reading it. So
I love Billy in my ear.
He did say it should be in the US by May. I think he'd said, who knows how timeframes alter there. You can still buy it from him. And what did we say the URL was? philosophyofwhiskey.com?
.com, yeah. Yep. You can buy it from him, but I think he specifically said, if you're not in the UK, please don't buy it from him.
So he's changed his tune on that.
He's changed his tune. Look at that. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then please buy it from him because he'll get a bit more money if you buy it directly from him, hopefully.
No, he definitely does. It's just a bit more money doesn't actually mean anything when you see how much more it is. But you should definitely get it from Billy and definitely get it signed. I am plugging in philosophyofwhiskey.com into my browser and I am looking at Billy's webpage. So 100% look up philosophyofwhiskey.com, and if you can get that from Billy, definitely go ahead and do so. It's well worth your time. It'll take you, if you're dramming and texting Billy and trying to finish up your workday and putting out small fires, it'll take you maybe an hour to read, an hour and a half. But what a read. Tickety-boo.
Beautiful.
Now, who are we talking to today?
We are talking to the absolutely wonderful Georgie Crawford.
Brilliant.
Former distillery manager of Lagavulin, former distillery manager of Port Ellen, and
that startup project,
current distillery manager of Elixir Distillers, distillery that's not on Islay yet, but they have officially broken ground. So on the soon-to-be Elixir Distillers distillery project, she is the distillery manager there, which is exciting.
Well, and one of the things that we cover in the interview is what does it mean to be a distillery manager of a distillery that hasn't been built? And she totally expected the question, absolutely had an answer ready to go, and I thought it spoke very well to her skill set. And it's interesting. So we just witnessed John Campbell. I was going to say retire from Lafroig. It kind of makes it sound even more serious than it is.
Departure.
Right. He has departed Lafroig for another as none named project. But so many times when we spoke to John, what was he really tasked with? And these are his words, not ours. But it was scheduling. It was human resources. It was management of people and people's times. And obviously going on the road, talking about the whiskies he was putting together. Mm-hmm. And without saying too much on Georgie's behalf here, I loved hearing her talk about the distillate. If you're looking to do X with the distillate, then you need to produce it in this way and ferment it in that way and mash it in this way. But if you're looking to do this other thing with the distillate, then you have to do this other, set of things within production.
Yep.
And I really liked that. I really enjoyed hearing that from her. And so obviously within this interview, she'll get to put many more leaves on those branches. But for you, any takeaways or any signposts for the listener today?
I'll say this one thing about Georgie. People have told us from the beginning, right? Because this is the first time you and I had ever met her, really, or
Indeed.
had a conversation with her. They said she really is super cool, super easy, and you're going to connect with her immediately. And it was from the get-go. Like, I felt as if she was one of us. Like, I would picture us chanting together, smashing our hands on the table. One of us, one of us. She was just cool as hell. There was no moment in time where I felt, okay, there's that awkward moment where you start to get to know someone and then you find the common ground and then the connections really start. Nope, it was from the beginning. And all I can think was, this is just a mate. Meanwhile, we're talking Georgie Crawford here, right? We're talking the former distillery manager of Lagavulin, right? My gateway whiskey, my favorite distillery to date. And we're just hanging out as if we're mates who have been on for a long time. And I thought that was very cool.
Very much so. Let's turn it over to us and Georgie Crawford.
Firstly, Georgie, thank you so much for joining us. It really is. It's an honor to have you on the podcast, but even more so, it was cool just hanging out before we pressed record. So many people, you hear the names like Georgie Crawford and John Campbell and Mickey Heads, and you get a little put on edge a little bit because these are the rock star names within the distillery manager world, and you just put us at ease, and it just felt like we were talking to an old
You already have her shaking her head at us, so we're off to a good start.
Yeah, but the listeners can't see that, Jason. They can't see her shaking her head.
They can now.
Yeah, but the listeners don't know that, the likes of myself and Mickey and John and Colin and the other guys all bump into each other in the co-op on a Friday night when we're doing our shopping. So we certainly don't feel like rock stars of anything when we're all in sort of getting our pizzas and things like that. So it's not like that for us, certainly.
So we definitely want to talk. We'd like to talk about your own whiskey journey, but I don't think we can set the stage properly, or I should say the proper way to set that stage is to first understand your own spark. What got you started in whiskey? What was it about whiskey that made you think, this may be for me?
It certainly wasn't a natural thing for me initially. It was kind of within the first stage of stepping into the industry when I worked at the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And what might be surprising to people is I didn't go there to work because I was interested in whisky at all, I'll be honest. I was running bars and restaurants in Edinburgh, had gone away travelling for a couple of years around the world, had come back, and I saw a job that had the bar closed at 11 at night, which is like really early for a bar closing. And I thought, God, that's a nice job. Actually, I'll be home in bed by midnight, so I'll apply for that job. And it was actually the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And although, you know, I wasn't a whisky drinker or hugely into whisky at that time, I obviously had grown up in Ireland, you know, had been sort of immersed in it in my childhood. It was kind of in the background of everything here. And my uncle worked for Bowmore in Auchentoshan, and you know, I grew up in a pub also in Islay, so you know, it was in the sort of backdrop of that as well. So I just wrote the words "I'm from Islay" on my CV, and popped it into the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. I obviously did run bars and restaurants, so from that point of view, obviously knew what I was doing. So they brought me in for an interview. It was like the old days where you used to just sit at a table and have a chat with someone, and you know, at the end of it, they gave you a job or didn't give you a job, and they gave me a job, but they also gave me a cask strength Rosebank to taste. And at that point, I thought, oh goodness. Oh goodness. What if I splutter this, or I can't, you know, can't keep it down. But you know, that was sort of the first of many incredible whiskies. And it was really through spending time with people there who were so enthusiastic that eventually I thought, you know, I really need to try and understand what it is. And it was other people's sparks actually that sort of set my spark going. And eventually there was a moment where, you know, I was nosing a whiskey where I just thought, oh, I get this. I absolutely get this now. I understand what it is. This is so unbelievably complex, and you know, I can really get what it is that people see in this, and that's kind of what started it. And from there, it was what I would really reflect on as being nosy and wanting to understand what was, you know, behind all that, and what made all these different whiskies so unique and different, and that sort of really sort of set me off on a bit of a journey. And I think the other thing that sort of was going on at the same time as well for me is I got incredibly proud of the product, I think, as well. The fact that in Scotland, and then, of course, you know, my Islay connection, we made these incredible global products, and that sort of still blows my mind to this day. And I think that was the other thing that was spurring me on was, you know, I would be going on holiday in places, whether it was Iceland, Cambodia, or wherever. I'm walking into bars and bottle shops and seeing these products and thinking, this is mind-blowing that this is happening, that we make these products in Scotland, and we have this, you know, real global outreach, and that sort of also pushed me forward into sort of wanting to be a part of it and understand it more.
Do you remember which whiskey was the one that the PCs came together on?
You stole my question, Jason. You stole my question.
Because it's interesting to me that you didn't volunteer the information, and so I didn't know if it was right to parse it out.
I actually have a bottle of it as well, still, that unopened, because
fantastic.
It was that sort of moment that I just thought, you know, I'm going to do this, and you know, this shows you how spoilt I started my career and pretty much have continued. It was, I think it was 24 years old, but it was certainly in its 20s. It was a Caperdonach.
There you go. Right. There you go.
In society terms, it was number 3811. And yeah, so I've still got that bottle in my collection. So I'm waiting for a good occasion probably to open it.
Well, it's interesting that you've now tied my second question to my first, which is it true you were at the SMWS the same time as Mark Watt, who's a huge Caperdonach fan?
Oh my gosh, look at that.
There's probably every chance it was Mark I was drinking it with, and it was probably his spark and his enthusiasm that for Caperdonach that probably set me on my way. I think there's every chance of that. Do you know, I can't remember that's exactly it, but let's make that the story now. You're going to see the story again in print later on, and Mark's going to be involved in it now. So, yeah.
I think we need to start a new game. I don't know if it's 6 degrees of Caperdonach or 6 degrees of Mark Watt or 6 degrees of Georgie Crawford, but somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think game. The 6 degrees of Mark Watt, we would only ever get to 2. You know, I don't think we would ever sort of go much further out than that. So, but yeah, no, I was incredibly lucky. I mean, at the time that I worked there, the people that were there that now, you know, I can call my friends and who influenced me and tutored me, and you know, it was Dr. Jim Swan that did our whiskey education for us. You know, that's actually was our staff training was with him. And then you had the likes of Charlie McLean and Robin Lang coming in every Tuesday night to do the tasting panels, so you were sort of chatting to these guys. And then, I mean, the people that worked in the bar in the back of house, so as you say, Mark Watt was there, Annabelle Meikle was my boss, and, I can name her as sort of my best friend still today. You were talking about Arthur Motley as well, who's at Royal Mile Whiskies, Stephen Marshall, who is making unbelievable beers now, but obviously worked for White Mackay for many years, David Blackmore, brand ambassador in the US. So we were all...
you had to suffer David Blackmore. Oh my gosh.
It can't all be rainbows and butterflies.
No, it can't be.
It
Absolutely can't be. But yeah, David, I was going to say worked on the bar, but actually now no, that's terrible. I'm not going to say terrible.
Yeah, did he dance? Is that what he did on a Friday night?
No,
his cowboy boots.
Find ways to talk to people instead, really. But but yeah, so there was so many of us that came up, and there's still people coming up through the SMWS, and it's an incredible place really for whiskey. And that idea that I was going to get home at 11 o'clock at night was absolute nonsense, because we would all sit and taste the whiskey after work. That was a key part of the job, was to actually to sit and have these conversations with each other and learn from each other. And you had to taste the whiskey to be able to talk about it, obviously, with the members.
Obviously.
So quite often you would sit down and you would have a dram at the end of the night. And, the idea of getting out at 11 o'clock never really transpired there either. So,
Well, we just ran an episode with the Westland crew where they talk about coming together on a weekly basis and doing blind tastings. Would that be part of what you were doing at SMWS as well, or were you familiar with what was going on? Obviously, you've got the numerical system with the built-in anonymity, but I think we all know our favourite numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we went down the blind tasting, and I'm not a massive fan of people sort of putting whiskies in front of you and going, guess what that is, because, you're just, they're definitely trying to lead you down a path that you're not going to get it right anyway. So not so much that, but certainly, making your own notes, sitting and making your own notes so that you understand, because I was only starting out then. So really it was about that sort of learning the language and, learning the language that was, fitted with your memories of what these flavors were and understanding that. And I think speaking to other people, you can be led in tastings where, someone says something and then everyone goes, oh yeah, it tastes of oranges or whatever. But actually without doing that in the first place, you would never step forward with anything. You would never sort of say what you think things taste of. So actually sometimes starting like that and sort of having that sort of psychosomatic thing happening is not a bad thing, initially. So I think, it's the one thing that, I find about whiskey is, it's around that sort of conversation. People sort of don't go into bars and pour a vodka and iron brew and talk about it, so, with whiskey, that was always the case, was, that you tend to sort of talk about it, and then it doesn't then just be about the whiskey. It turns into other conversations and other friendships and, people opening up about, each other and having different sort of occasions with each other. So that was always the sort of thing about doing that. And I think it's really important to do that, with your whiskies, is actually, sharing, certainly amongst staff and people like that, and sort of having those conversations where they're open and relaxed and it's not snobbish and, one-upmanship or anything like that. Just sort of nice.
If I can ask one more question, then I'll let Joshua get a word in edgewise. You're talking about all these people being in the same place at the same time. I know, you're 100% right. Did you have was this towards the late 90s, early 2000s? Was it?
Got to be careful what age you think I am here, Jason.
I'm trying to be careful, and I don't know if I'm doing a good job or not.
That the 90s are now 30 years ago, so let's tighten that up a little bit. Okay,
fine. It was my birthday on Monday this week, so I'm not gonna give away what age it was, but you're fine. But yeah, you're not far off. So it was still independently owned when I first went there. So it was before Glenmorangie. So I was there in sort of 2002, early 2002, I think it was. And then there was the transition period during that time where the Glenmorangie company purchased the SMWS. So early 2000s.
The only reason I was trying to kind of get a time on it was actually to ask the question, which was, did you have a sense at the time that something big was happening right around you, as somebody who'd come in with no whiskey background, no whiskey knowledge, but obviously from Islay? Was there a sense of that, or was it just like, oh, there's a cool chap, there's a cool lass, there's someone I can drink with?
No, I mean, we were all just going to work, we were all going, I mean, don't get me wrong, incredible work that we got to do, and not everyone sort of gets to sit and play backgammon at the end of the night and taste, I don't know, Caperdonics and those banks and all that sort of stuff, which is quite often what we would do. But it was work, but it was work with incredible liquids and work with incredible people. Eventually evolved on to being able to be, on the tasting panel in the time that I was there, which, was a real privilege. And of course, host sort of tastings up and down the country and a couple of sort of wee trips abroad as well. So, but we were, it'd been established for quite a number of years by that point as well, really, from the sort of early days. So, it had been around, but obviously it has grown and grown and grown, over time. I was listening to a podcast recently where Jamie Oliver mentioned the fact that he was a member of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, which was just fantastic. I thought, what an advert.
Was he wearing clothes at the time?
Like this podcast, I hope no one's going to actually see that I'm not wearing anything, Joshua. Is that not how it works in a podcast? Okay.
Yep. The naked distillery manager, paging HR.
Okay. Anyway, back to another question.
Yeah, right. So, what I loved hearing about this, you rattled off a bunch of names where, David Blackmore and, of course yourself and Mark Watt and so on and so forth. And now these are all the larger either brand ambassadorial names, or they've gone on to start their own independent bottling company, or they've gone on to be distillery managers, etc. So Scotch Malt Whisky Society was a bit of a hotbed for the next generation of the face of whiskey, or the people within whiskey making the whiskey. And so I wonder, after Scotch Malt Whisky Society, was it straight on to Lagavulin for you? What was the next stop on the train for you, on the whiskey train?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, not that I want to sort of start any rumours, it involves Mark Watt again. But,
all right. There's a pattern.
Yeah, I know. We're going to start some sort of rumour here, but no. So as you know, in whiskey, you meet people. That's one of the huge, draws about whiskey and being part of the industry, is that it's incredibly small, really. From a point of view of producers and people that work in it, and. Over time, got to know a friend of Mark's, Mike Lord, and he was purchasing the whiskey shop up in Dufton, and he'd approached me at that point to say, look, I'm not going to be able to leave. He had a job in London at the time. I'm not going to be able to leave London for a couple of years, to sort of go up, but I really want to purchase it because it's for sale just now. And would you be interested in going up and managing it for me? And that was kind of the step. Then the next step on the journey was to move up actually into Dufton. Which then sort of opened up a whole other area of understanding whiskey for me, because I'd worked obviously with single cask strength. I mean, talk about sort of starting at the top, I suppose, a little bit, but then I had to sort of go and learn, well, actually, single cask whiskey they're all unique, and even from one distillery, you can have quite unique flavours coming through in the cask. So actually, I, through the shop, started to learn more about what the distillery styles actually were. And that then is what led on the sort of journeys, as it continued to say, well, how is that different? How is it that there is these distillery styles, and how does that sort of work? And because I was then based in Speyside, I got to spend a lot more time than I did in Edinburgh actually going to distilleries, and that was a big part of what I did when I was up there. Obviously, we were involved, as the shop still is today, in the Spirit of Speyside Whisky Festival, hosting lots of different whiskey events through the shop, and going out and sort of going to distillery tours. And at that time, I shared a house with Mark, So he was working for Duncan Taylor at the time, and there was a lot of whiskey and a lot of whiskey friends, that would come and stay with us during that period as well. So it was really still discovery through liquid for me at that point, but really starting to build my knowledge more about how it's actually made rather than just talking about the end product.
It's so interesting that you had that direction on your journey. We've spoken so much, on the podcast and just in general, about people who discover distilleries and have favourite distilleries, then go on to find these cask strength, single cask versions. And we always talk about it. It's good to know the distillery to know what that single cask is really delivering that's different or off the beaten path, or, a zig instead of a zag. And so it's an interesting way to go from, I've done all of these single casks. Now, what is it you do at your distillery? Talk to me about your distillery.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Do you know, I realised when I sort of got to the shop and sort of got into sort of the sort of Speyside whiskey side of stuff that I was like, oh my God, I really don't know anything about that. We were so very spoilt but blinkered in a way towards this uniqueness of this single cask. And actually what you were doing all the time was just selling that one cask or that one story around that liquid. Now, yes, of course, you learnt a bit about the distillery, but, it wasn't as immersive into understanding the connection between sort of the house style or the distillery style and how that was then made. And then, do you know what? The cask stuff is separate from that. That is a layer of uniqueness that's built in through the maturation process. So so it opened up my eyes to realize how little I knew, which is good. I think that's it's I still have my eyes opened every day to that. But so it was really, really interesting, and it was a brilliant period as well because working with friends, and people that were genuinely passionate about whiskey for all the right reasons, and really about educating other people. And that was one of the key things when I went to my next job that I took with me, which was really around that sort of educating other people, educating myself. And as I was doing that, really sort of trying to educate other people.
So what was that next job? I'm still, my mind is still blown. I never knew you were at the Dufftown Whiskey Shop. I just never knew that about you at all.
Yeah, I was there just shy of 2 years. Just at the time then that Mike sort of moved up because initially, as I say, he wasn't able to base himself in Dufftown. But I saw a job. I wasn't looking for a job particularly, but someone sent me the Press and Journal, which is the local newspaper up in that area, and said, "Look, you might be interested in this." And it was the brand home manager at Talisker Distillery. And so that's the visitor centre manager. And that was the first job. That was my stepping stone into Diageo. I went to Sky in 2007 and took over the role of running the visitor centre there and really sort of trying to put more emphasis into less about whiskey tours and more emphasis into experiential stuff that we were doing and tastings and sort of really trying to do education. And then in the time that I was there, we also started to host the internal Diageo sort of education program called the Malt Advocates program. So I was one of the hosts for the Malt Advocates where we were training other people in Diageo around the brands and sort of the uniquenesses of our whiskies, which was absolutely fantastic. But because it's very isolated on Sky and as a management team it's very small, you naturally start working in production. So we have an on-call system at most distilleries where a manager should be available 24/7 because the plant runs 24/7. So one manager must be available overnight and at weekends in case anything happens that the operations team needs you. And that started me doing more and more of this sort of production side of things. And that's kind of where I started to think, actually, because I think when I first joined Diageo, I think the interview, they asked me, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Standard sort of question. And I said, global brand ambassador. I'm going to do a global brand ambassador job for you in 5 years' time, and that's where we're going to be. And that's not how it went at all. So, I sort of just really got involved in production and the sort of understanding the process and trying to understand the process, and that's kind of where I ended up, and it was from my time at Talisker that then they took me onto a production management program that took me then to Glenord and Tinninnick Distillery, which not a lot of people sort of get to go to, but that was where I was based for 9 months, was between the two sites, but mostly at Tinninnick at the time. And then from there, they approached me and said, Peter Campbell, the distillery manager on Islay, is looking to get a move to the mainland. His kids are ready to go to university, and, I had some internal and external sort of exams and things that I had to do to sort of pass being a manager. And they said, all being well, how do you fancy the distillery manager at Lagavulin job? So that was pretty mind-blowing, I have to say, at the time. So, so that was 2010. I came back home as the manager at Lagavulin, and my dad was over the moon at the thought of getting some sort of discount in the shop.
And you're coming home.
I'm coming home and he gets to see me all the time. You're absolutely right. That's what he was thinking.
A close second.
Was there a part for you that in moving Islay off to Edinburgh, off to Dufftown area, off to Skye? Was there a part of you had thought about going home? Would there be a potential for you to go home? Did you think, I'm going to be one of those people that leaves Islay and doesn't go home? What were you thinking there as an Illich?
Yeah, well, I left Islay when I was a teenager, and I don't think at that time I had any thought that I was going to be going back there. I think when I started working in whiskey, there was a little inkling in the back of my head that it might lead me back there, but it wasn't a plan. It wasn't like I'm going to go back to Islay. And it still probably wasn't a plan when I was starting out on the production sort of management stuff, but, there would be always an inkling. But of course, with many of these jobs, when you work with a company like Diageo, and it's the same with some of the other larger whiskey companies, that there's a chance that yes, you might go back, but you might not be there for a long time. You might move again, or you might go into another role. There's always opportunities to still do that brand ambassador job eventually, if that's what sort of you fancied. So I think even when I did come back to Islay, I don't know if I was convinced I was going to. That was it. This would be the place that I sort of wanted to come back and settle. Now, that is inevitably what has happened. I have no desire to leave Islay, but of course I left when I was a teenager, and you wanted to be able to go out to the cinema and to the shops and all that sort of stuff, and that's what I at 13, 14 wanted from life. You know what I mean? Whereas now, returning 20 years later, when I first came back in 2010, that wasn't necessarily, as it panned out, everything that I felt I needed and wanted in the end.
Yeah. You may have touched on it a little bit when you were talking about Talisker, but I'll try to ask this question. What was it about the production side of things in Talisker that grabbed your attention? Are you someone who's always liked the nuts and bolts of things? Do you like tweaking things to make them more efficient? Like, what was it? Because you went in there, or when you had your conversation with Diageo, you said, I want to be a global brand ambassador. It's a stark difference to being attracted to a production position. So what was the spark there that grabbed your attention?
Do you know, it's really difficult, I think, to put my finger on it. I just like working in the production team. I feel, just really, really at home working with the team more in the production and process. And don't get me wrong, there's always been an element in the roles that I've done and still, in my new job, whereas you get the best of both worlds. So I will absolutely, be a part of the production team. I like firefighting. I'm a pretty good problem solver. I don't get, flustered if there's an issue. I'm quite sort of methodical in my thought process. And you have to remember, distillery managers are not necessarily there turning the steam valves every day. That's your production team's job, but you are there to sometimes get through some of the difficult things that will happen in a distillery, and to support people and put, a lot of things in place to make sure that we're doing what we need to do, that we're making the right products, and you're covering off all that side of it. But as I say, I've been lucky in the roles that I've had. I get to also do the education piece. I still get to do the talking to people and igniting that spark in them that was given to me. So, I have worked at Talisker. It's still a brand-facing site. Now, yes, I went and did the more sort of Tininic, Glenord stuff to really get my process knowledge up, and also, what I didn't know at the time was they were setting me up for coming to Islay, because it was a similar setup, a couple of distilleries and a maltings, so it was around sort of trying to get as much experience in maltings as well, because when you do work within a group of distilleries, you don't just necessarily just work at your own distillery. As a duty manager, you then are getting called out, different in Skye to Islay, but you were maybe 1 week in 5, you were the duty manager for the whole week, and if there was a breakdown at Port Ellen Maltings, you were going to Port Ellen Maltings. If there was a breakdown at Cleela, you were going there. So, that was your sort of process education and the firefighting element of it. That although we don't want to be in that place, you have to be, you have to be quite able to do. But still, you get to talk to people as well. You get to sort of educate people, and I think probably from understanding my own ignorance all the way through my whiskey journey has got me to a place where I think people should be a bit more educated maybe in some of the process stuff, and what I like is being able to do it in terms where it's not above people's heads. We don't have to overcomplicate it, and we can be quite transparent and open about the process and the production side of things, but do it in a way which is inclusive and it's an easier conversation with people. So I've always really enjoyed that sort of the fact that I have managed to put my feet in both camps and do the brand side and the production side.
Yeah, brilliant. Jason, you look like you have a question. You're putting up your question finger, so go ahead. You do you. If I may.
So I've distilled everything I would want to ask you about Lagavulin down into one question.
Wow.
And it's not production. I love Lagavulin 8-year-old. And the fact that I'm drinking Georgie Crawford Lagavulin is exciting to me, very exciting. This is a similar question to the one that I asked Bill Lumsden when he was on. Ardbeg puts out Wee Beastie with a name and the number 5 on it. We've now got Lagavulin putting out, and obviously the name Lagavulin, but with an 8 on it. What was the hope, the goal, the sales pitch? Lagavulin is so well known for the 16, and the 16 was the entry point. Obviously, the 12 in bourbon is living its life in the annual releases. But now there's a store shelf 8 that's fantastic and wonderfully affordable, incredibly drinkable. How did it come to be, and what was your role in that?
Well, to be honest with you, with a lot of established brands that you might go and work with, you don't necessarily, as the distillery manager, have a huge amount of input into it. So absolutely, like Lagavulin 16-year-old, our jobs, the distilleries quite often is to be custodians of the liquid and the process and the quality, and making sure that you're kind of doing the same thing again at the distillery. And then, of course, it comes to the blenders. So quite often in a lot of distilleries, where it comes to what the new releases are going to be, what are we going to do, it actually sits in the hands of the marketing team, because they see what the consumer wants, and it sits then with the blenders. However, with the 8-year-old, I can categorically say I was in the room at the time the concept actually came up, so which is quite nice. And I don't think you knew that necessarily, Jason, because we certainly hadn't talked about it. So
I did not.
We came up with the concept of that for the 200-year anniversary, and I think when you first see the bottles that came out, they actually have got the logo for the 200-year on them. And I think what we wanted to do, because we knew we would do the trophy malt, the 25-year-old, and of course we did the single cask for charity, which was incredible. But we also wanted something that people would actually open and drink. That was it. And I think when we sat and we talked about it, and we were all sitting in the malt mill, the old building that we've got on site, which was the maltings of the malt mill distillery. we were all sat in there, and I mean, it was again a who's who. I feel like a terrible name drop today, but a who's who of Diageo sort of people. So in there you had Jo McKercher from the archives. So she was there sort of, and she'd been looking at different stuff as well. Then you had Nick Morgan there, obviously, as well. Myself, you had Donald Colville. So, and a lot of sort of other, important people in the marketing teams and stuff like that. And sitting talking about, if we were going to do something, what are we going to do? And it was absolutely something affordable. Something affordable and something that cost less than the 16. That was the key criteria as far as we were concerned, and that people would open and drink and celebrate with us. And that's what we wanted. So the story of the 8-year-old then came from Jo, because she'd done a lot of looking at the history, and obviously you look at sort of pinpoints in time where you can say certain things were happening at a distillery, and most of that has been written in books. And for a lot of people, the Alfred Bernard book of visiting the distilleries is one of those key points where you can say, we know we were making whiskey of such and such a style, because he writes about it, in the late 1800s. And in that book, he had tasted an 8-year-old and had declared it to be, fantastic. So that's where then the inspiration for making it an 8-year-old. And I think the other thing I think we all agreed on the day was, let's put the number on the bottle and not say what it is. Let's say what it is and be proud of it. Let's, get the liquid. And then that's where, Maureen Robinson started then working with the liquids and looking at what could be pulled together. And that's where the 8-year-old, the 8-year-old got pulled together. And I have to say, it is absolutely adored in this house. I mean, we were big 16-year-old drinkers, and the 8-year-old then became something that really became one of our sort of day-to-day go-to. Sounds terrible, day-to-day whiskies, but one of our sort of real day-to-day go-to whiskies. And I just think it is absolutely cracking, and affordable was the sort of key thing, really, so that people wouldn't be putting it on a shelf and dusting it down every year when they were tidying up their bottles and going, that's my wee Lagavulin that I got for the anniversary. It was actually get it open, get it drunk, and then they've decided to keep it on because it obviously was such a success, which is fantastic.
Which I'm so excited about, the continuation of this and the entry into the line. Obviously, there's no hiding the cork on this one, but while you were speaking, I'd made it all the way to about 10 minutes to noon for me in Virginia, and I had to open it. I had to pour some. Joshua actually acquired me a 12-pack in Massachusetts. They had it for $40 a bottle, and
$40 or $42.
Brilliant.
Yep, I placed an order for a 12-pack. And then I made sure, Joshua took a bottle or two from that. Local friends here in Virginia took a bottle or two. I've got in my closet is the other door, the one you can't see. I've got it sitting in there. And so here I am now on the last, it's at the bottom label now. When this is gone, I'll go into my cupboard, I'll pull out another bottle, and it'll go right on the shelf
hard,
as well.
Isn't it? Life is hard. Yeah.
So I was going to grab my bottle of the 8-year-old, but so you see this little wall next to me. This is part of the upstairs collection, and the 8-year-old is downstairs. And the reason it's downstairs is that's where everybody is, and when we have guests over, I want that to be accessible. I want that to be in people's glasses. So I'm going to have to suffer the 2018 Fagile.
Oh, I don't know how you're going to cope with that. So that is awful.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Do
you know, you're talking about whiskey collections there. I did keep bottles from the time that I was at Lagavulin, and it is a hardship having old festival bottles. And a situation has arisen recently where I'm going to have to drink my festival bottles, because I had thought I was clever by storing them up out the way, some of them, because some of them are ones that I would want to keep, one of certain bottlings that I was involved in, and we put them in the loft, and that was the worst thing that I could possibly do, because mice have eaten the foils on several.
They eat the foils?
They've nibbled the foils. They haven't, like, everything else is fine. They're still in the plastic bag that protects the labels. They've nibbled some of the foils, which I think is the weirdest things. So they've not necessarily got into the whiskey, but they've nibbled away at some of the foils on these whiskies. So I'm just going to have to open and drink them now. And Joshua, some of that's like the single cask 2011s that they used to do back in the day at the festival. But I'll think about you when I open that one specifically.
Yeah, I hear a
Because you two are
party
sitting
forming
drinking in
at
front of
Georgie's house.
Well, it's yeah. Well, there'll be a housewarming at some point soon, so maybe invite us.
Brilliant. Yes, we'll make ourselves available.
Yes, indeed.
I'm not saying we're invited,
I'll
but
bring
we'll be
some mice
available.
with me just in case.
So before we, please, Joshua, please.
Well, obviously part of the reason we were having you on the podcast today is you've taken a position with Elixir Distillers, and they'll be building a distillery coming soon. But I'm curious, I know Jason was able to distill everything he wanted to know about your time at Lagavulin through the lens of the 8-year-old. Yeah. But I'm really curious about your time at Lagavulin and specifically, what your day-to-day role was and how you feel that will inform your next move here.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it was kind of like I touched on before. It's that sort of custodianship, These distilleries, during the time that I was lucky to be at Lagavulin, it had its 200-year anniversary. So you certainly don't go in there thinking that you're going to make such a massive impact or difference to the life of Lagavulin. The life of Lagavulin is going to go on way past the time that you're there. So really it's about sort of taking on that sort of the baton and the challenge to make sure that you're making the best possible product that you can at that distillery. And, you can be biased, and of course, I worked for Diageo, who owned Lagavulin. But once I sort of set out on my whiskey journey, if someone had said to me, regardless of who owned a distillery, if you were going to go back to Islay and manage a distillery at that time, where would it have been? And it would have been Lagavulin. I mean, from a point of view of the quality of the product and really how people felt about it. Really, it really, I mean, don't get me wrong, all the distilleries in Islay I absolutely adore, and I love all their whiskies, I love all their stories, and there's just sort of great things that everyone has done and is doing. But there's just, for me personally, always been something about the way that Lagavulin, penetrates sort of people's passion and how they speak about it. And that was, the case for our family. My dad, he was an accountant, although he had a pub when I was very young. He actually was a trained accountant and went back to being an accountant here on the island. And quite often at sort of Christmas, people would come and give him bottles. That would be sort of, what was done here on Islay. People leave bottles of whiskey out for the bin men at Christmas. Whiskey is given for every occasion. And he would get excited about some whiskies, and he would, in Lagavulin, if he got Lagavulin, he knew his client really thought that he'd done a good job that year. Other whiskies, not so much. They would probably go into a raffle or, that sort of thing. So, but certainly in our house, Lagavulin was always sort of seen to be, the sort of pinnacle of quality, really, and what was made in Islay whiskies. So day to day, it was, it's operations, it's not the sort of glamour end of the business necessarily that people want to hear about, but it is unbelievably important that you're sort of working with a team of people that feel as passionate as you do about making that product and doing it in the best possible way you can. But a lot of what we do at distilleries is operational. It's making sure the plant runs. It's maintenance work. It's looking for opportunities to make more liquid. We did some really interesting projects in the time that we were there because the footprint could never really be made any bigger. So we did lots of really interesting projects around, how can we maximise on what we make here without in any way being detrimental to the quality and the flavour profile. So that was quite a lot of what I did, and quite a lot of the challenge that we took on was how we did that. So in the time I was there, we did up the production level without really sort of doing anything that we would say would be impactful into change in flavour. So that was a lot of the challenge, which I really, really enjoyed.
I remember one afternoon we were sitting with John Campbell in his office, and he had to go to a training where it was a new program for scheduling people, right? And it's like, you want to talk about what people think I do in the whiskey industry and what I do actually in the whiskey industry.
Exactly where I was going. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And it's, I know that a question's about to come, around what am I currently doing in my new job, and it's exactly the same. There's the glamour bit of what I get to do in my new job, and there's the not so glamour bit I get to do in my new job. I think the distillery manager job is very like the distillery itself. That's kind of how I see it. People come to distilleries and they want to see the glamour end of the distillery. They're like, show me your mash tun, show me your washbacks. What are they made of? Let me have a look at your stills, and they look at the sort of the high end glamour, glossy bit of the business. But what they don't see is the bit that actually we work more day to day with, which is the steam pipe work, the water, the condenser pipe work, because without all of that working properly, there is no glamour end of the business. And I think sort of that's kind of what the distillery manager job is like as well. People think it's doing podcasts and chatting to people like you and doing brand work and maybe tasting a little bit of whiskey and picking casks and things like that. But that's not what it's like. It's it's working with legislation and health and safety and making sure if someone's off sick that you've got covered on. So it's people see the glamour about it the same way as they see the glamour within the distillery, but actually the job's sometimes just feels like a job. I know that a lot of people think that was a bit sacrilegious to say about working as a distillery manager at Lagavulin, but sometimes it's just a job.
Yeah.
So you don't have people saying, show me your HMRC paperwork. I want to see that side of it.
No one is coming in saying, can I see that confined space risk assessment? No. Which is a lot of what we actually do day to day.
So what do you do day to day when you're the distillery manager of a distillery that doesn't exist yet?
Incredibly good. Well, I just want to clear something up. We have got groundswork people started on the site 4 days ago. So although it doesn't exist yet, yeah, absolutely. So on my birthday on Monday actually was when the guys started to arrive. So yes,
happy birthday!
Thanks. And I just thought, what a lovely thing that the guys are getting started. So so we are getting started. But no, you're absolutely right. I have been incredibly fortunate to be brought onto the project really early on. And that's something of a real asset, I think, for everyone involved, because I think I've spoken to a lot of managers that come in much later on and then they're saying, well, why did you design it like this? Or what am I going to do with that? So, I'm incredibly fortunate to be there. So to use the same analogy as earlier on, the glamour end of what I'm doing just now is probably getting sort of feedback from Sukhinder and Ollie and Rajbir on what is it you want to make. That's fundamentally the first question I ask them is what is the spirit profile? What is the flavour profile that you want to make? Because they've been working on this project much longer than me. They know why they want to do it. They know the liquids they want to make. So the first thing I've got to do just now is what is it you want to make? And then my job is to then work out how we do that. So I then take that information and say, okay, so, and I'm not going to give anything away here, so you can try, but I'll talk in general terms. If you want to have a characteristic, let's say, that's nutty, then I would look at, right, well, how are we going to make the mash tun work for us to make a cloudy wort? And what sort of fermentation time do I want to then retain that cereal nutty character, and then how do I want to operate the stills to enhance that sort of cereal nutty character? And once I look at all of that sort of thing, I create a mashing and distilling plan. So it might seem like it's a bit early on to already know how many mashes a week you're going to do and all that sort of stuff. But if I do that and they then tell me, well, I want it to do 1 million litres a year, I can work out how many washbacks that we need by doing that. Or I can work out then design work for the stills, the volumes that will go in the stills, and then depending on the character that I want to get through the distillation process, how big those stills need to be. And I can work with the engineering team. So don't get me wrong, I'm not an engineer. We work with incredible people, and the engineering team that we're working with on that, then they will work with myself on, right, well then this is what we need to put in place. This is, the levels of heating that we need to distill it in X amount of hours, because that's how we want to do it, and we build it from the sort of beginning. So that's kind of the glamour side of what I'm getting to do just now, which is talk about the characters we want to make and then work out the jigsaw puzzle of actually how do we do that, and then make sure that the kit and the plant is in place to enable us to do that in the future. So that's the glamour side. The not so glamour side is HMRC licenses or environmental plans or, all that sort of legislative stuff, because actually we're going to make a sort of food and it'll be under food production. So there's a load of legislation that we have to sort of comply with there. So my job is also to make sure that we're also putting in place everything we need to operate the distillery as well. So so we're kind of working on a bit of all of that just now as we go through. And then, of course, with the building work started, it's construction, so doing a bit of sort of overview of that, and then it'll be plant installation, and that's again where we'll sort of start to a bit more intense look at how it's all coming together. But we will have already done 3D models and designs of the entire of the layout of the distillery by that point.
Sure.
So again, things like once they create the 3D models, I'll then use that to walk through to think of things like, there's a valve, can I reach that to maintain it? Here's a pump up here in the air. Well, how am I going to get to that? Are we going to put a platform in to give access? So we have to own and understand every pump, valve, nut, bolt, to think about where we are. So that's why I say I'm privileged to be involved just now, because I've got a vested interest. I've got to operate it with a team of people later on, so the vested interest is to try and get it right so that later on I can say, well, this is then dead easy to maintain and operate and work with. So it's really, that's the bit I find really, really interesting, is, the sort of making sure that we're setting ourselves up for that sort of future success of operating the plant, as well as making the lovely liquid and, all that sort of stuff as well.
So I know there's a little, obviously we're living in a pandemic and timescales have gone out the window. Is there a hope to be running Spirit in 2022, 2023, 2024? Or is it, let's just break ground on October 10, let's clear the grounds and let's see what the next 3 months look like?
Yeah, I mean, we're saying roughly we think it's going to take 2 years, but of course there is the Islay element, which I'm not going to bore you with all the issues with our ferries and the weather in the winter, but there is a lot of that to sort of consider, and bearing in mind we have also seen Port Ellen Distillery kick off again as well. So there is going to be sort of quite a lot of activity going on over the next couple of years on the island with stuff. So yeah, we're presuming 2 years. That's kind of what our projection sort of the project plan is, to be in that place, and then we will take the right amount of time to commission the liquid as well, to make sure that we're making exactly what we want to make.
So exciting.
I know, it is super exciting.
So there's an interesting timing element here where you've got the Port Ellen distillery about to finish being built, soon to be open, nowhere near being open.
So
not even close.
Obviously previous to joining Elixir, I'd been sort of part of the project team there, and that all paused for the pandemic. So really it's only kicking off and starting back up again just now. But the grounds work, so the clearing of the site and preparation, the taking down of the redundant buildings and all that work had been done. And we were able to use, at that point, some local contractors who were based on the island to do a lot of that work. So we weren't bringing people in. That was one of the key things that not just, the Port Ellen project, but all the distilleries on Islay and all the sort of big businesses on Islay were very, had a lot of thought about, was not adversely bringing people onto the island. So everyone kind of went to a process that said, yes, we will continue to operate, but unless it's legislative that certain work gets done, which in the industry that we're in, there are some things that you have to do by law from a maintenance point of view. But unless it was legislative, really all the distilleries went into a place where all projects went on hold. So the upgrade up at Kalila went on hold as well. The Port Ellen project went on hold. And, that kind of was the decision that everyone made just across the island, so that we weren't bringing people onto the island, that we didn't have to, because of course there was a big fear that because we do not have a big hospital, and because if anyone becomes ill, really they have to be transported off the island by air ambulance and things like that, that it wasn't appropriate really to be bringing people onto the island unless it was mandatory.
Wow.
So before the pandemic, it seemed as if the timing of the opening of Port Ellen was perfect, as it would come right before the new Elixir Distillers distillery opened. And now are you on a similar schedule? And if so, do you find yourself saying, well, let's let them get their ducks in a row while we do our... How do you have to think about any of that with two distilleries being built
you
at the
have to
same
think
time?
about it from a point of view of logistics, getting stuff on and off the island. But also, as we touched on earlier on when we talked about sort of, all the people that, I've previously worked with, the industry being very small. Well, actually, the contractors that we use tend to be quite specialist as well. So we tend to use quite a lot of similar contracting companies and things like that. So, but what's naturally happened, because Port Ellen is ahead, and is not as big a build, really, I think, in comparison to what we're doing with Elixir, because they are using some of the buildings that were already there, and it's within the site of the maltings, so they're not having to sort of build everything from scratch. They're slightly ahead anyway, and then that sort of allows a natural sort of flow, I think, for anyone who's working on both projects, or potentially might work on both projects, that actually there would probably be a nice natural sort of ebb and flow from the Port Ellen project into the Elixir project. So I think that hopefully that's kind of how I'm viewing it, as a benefit, rather than, oh my goodness, where are we putting all these contractors, which might still be an issue. I think if anyone's got spare houses on Islay, now's the time to start doing B&B, I think. But yeah, so I think hopefully it will be a benefit to us rather than detrimental. But we'll wait and see how that plays out.
Sure. Jason, you looked like you had a question.
Jason's always got a question.
There.
This is what Jason...
Oh, they call him 7-question Jason around here, but he goes to 11 this one.
It's so funny because that's my face when I'm not stepping on Joshua's toes or Nick's questions. So it's just
It's
just put your hand up so he knows you want to go next.
Peekaboo. I have a question, as you've both figured out, and in listening to you describing what you're currently doing as Distillery Manager, it sounds like, from when we saw Kilhoman, when we talked about Jim Swan earlier, and thinking about Jim Swan goes in as the consultant. What do you want to get out of this? But then Jim Swan doesn't become the Distillery Manager, right? He goes on and does another consultancy gig. Here you are, consultant into Distillery Manager, that I would imagine would roll. I'm watching your face to see how well this question's going over, and not well, just for the listener at home. And so you're going to roll maturation into that, and so you alluded to maturation earlier on. Do you have a guiding principle with maturation? Is there something that you think maturation can do that will dovetail with what you're doing in production of the spirit? Are you working with Ollie on maturation to get to the final product? What does maturation look like, and what guides you when you're thinking about maturation? I think you touched on it there, really, and that's where working really closely with Ollie is going to be the key there. So I think traditionally in some of the larger
companies, you hand over the casks. Basically, you hand over the sort of the maturation sort of element and to the master blenders.
Sure.
I don't think, I think one of the things that drew me to joining the team with Elixir is that it's not going to be so in boxes, that we're all going to work together as a team, and that's what really interests me about sort of expanding my knowledge, as always is about. So when we're creating what we're talking about in the flavour profiles that I talked about earlier on, a lot of that I'm speaking to Ollie and Sukhinder about. I need to get out of your heads and out of your hearts what you want. But a lot of that, as you'll understand, is about the new make spirit profile. Absolutely. That's, for me, in the production, we're making the new make spirit profile. So, but we will also talk, around what did the flavours that we want in the end product to be, and then that leads us into the conversations around wood and cask and how we want to sort of approach that. But really, that will be very aligned with what Ollie as our master blender will want from it as well. So yeah, it won't just be a handover. Absolutely not. I think we're going to be putting some cask filling facilities onto the site as well. So we will be looking to make sure that we're doing that and doing some sort of wood management alongside that. And yes, there'll be long-term sort of aspirations of what those flavour profiles will be, and then the discussions about how we manage that wood and get that wood. Absolutely, I've come from a background of someone else did that for me, so that's both daunting and exhilarating at the same time. That's another step that I'll get to play a part in and be involved in as we sort of have these ongoing sort of conversations about the flavour profiles that we're building.
As someone who was involved so much in education, and we've talked in this conversation about marketing and production and education, and there's a lot of talk in whiskey circles that, and I'm just talking about Islay as a whiskey producing island. I'm not identifying individual distilleries here, but we talk about this Islay characteristic of peaty and seaweedy and sometimes iodine, but there's something of the sea about it. There's something of the Hebridean island about it. Some of the liquid is being matured whole cloth on the mainland when some is on the island. Why is it? Why do you think it still has the qualities of the sea when, aside from running through a still, it's never sat by the sea?
It's something that absolutely bamboozles and amazes everyone in the industry. I don't think they've ever been able to define it, understand it, find traces of salt in whiskey, any of these things. And I think, there has over the years been many new articles and debates about terroir and, all these things. And I'm not going to get into that because I was involved in a debate many years ago about it. But all you can say is that, Scotland's an island. Even in the central belt of Scotland, you're not far away from getting to the coast. It's an incredibly small place. So, let's just say that there's an overall maritime influence in Scotland. I think it's the easiest way to not get into some huge debate about, what people do or don't find. But I think, sometimes it's quite nice not being able to put your finger on everything. You can sit and write a chemical equation for alcohol, and you can sit and write, all papers on what happens in fermentation, and but sometimes it's quite nice just maybe not knowing, maybe not understanding that, and just leaving it as a sort of something that happens. I think probably is, I'm not one for sort of using just romantic tropes about whiskey. I do like, the transparency that we're now seeing in the industry. I think a lot of the new startup and independent guys, and hopefully ourselves will be included in that, are speaking to people in a language that they can understand. It is no longer the peaty whiskey rolling off the hills. It's much more than that. So I think, but there's still a little bit of me sometimes has that wee romantic bit about it that says, you know what, let's not push it too much and let's leave a little bit of a wee bit of mystique and mystery. So I think that's one of the ones that I would do. But looking out the window today where I cannot even see the bottom of the garden, I can kind of see how even in production a maritime flavour might get into the spirit because it is absolutely blowing a gale outside and pouring the rain, and it's got all those elements and flavours that if you were standing, anywhere on Islay with any peaty Islay whiskey, that that you taste, that then when you go back home and 6 months later taste the same whiskey, and it transports you back to Islay, to that wet, windy, rainy day. So let's allow us to continue to have the romantic bit about that, and maybe not delve too far into salt and whiskey.
I like the thought of Nick Morgan's spidey sense tingling because you just said the word terroir out loud. Like Nick's not sure why he feels the way he feels right now, but he's got a certain.
Yeah. He had his Obi-Wan moment.
Somebody just said it somewhere.
Yeah, it's funny when, as you were talking about that, I remember a conversation I was having with James McTaggart over at Arran, and this was years on. And I had asked him, I said, there's always this lovely sort of delicate briny note in your whiskey that I really like, and I'm curious, as the distillery manager, where's that coming from? You've got your finger on the pulse. And he said, our marketing department would tell you that it's, we're on the coast and there's ocean water lapping up against the warehouse and it's the sea breeze. I could tell you that that's all just a load of pish. I just know it's in there, and I like it.
Absolutely.
And I love it, right? That's just like, sometimes you don't need to know. Sometimes it's okay that it's just there.
I think sometimes, and don't get me wrong, I'm enough of a whiskey geek myself, but I think you'll also find that a lot of us who work in whiskey day to day are not as geeky as some of the guys that are just sort of really into whiskey. So we don't actually feel we have to know everything and understand it. But I remember years ago taking some people around Talisker Distillery, and for some reason we were walking past from the warehouse to, I don't know where we were sort of heading around the site, and the boiler house was right sort of there, and they were like, can we have a look in the boiler house? And I was like, yeah, if you want to have a look at the boiler. I don't know why you'd want to look at the boiler house. And we have to treat the water that goes into the boiler with salt. That's just sort of something that we do in process. And so there's bags and bags of salt all on a pallet piled up in the boiler house, and I think they were absolutely convinced that we were putting. They were like, "Is that the salt that you put in the washbacks to get the salty flavour?" And I was like, "Absolutely, we do not put salt in the washbacks." So yeah, I think they were convinced that
Oh, you're leaving your trade secrets everywhere. Just bags of salt.
House, that's it. Yep. So.
Yeah, a little information can be a very dangerous thing, right?
I couldn't agree more with you.
So, Jason, should we get us out of here? How about you get us out of here on our final question?
Well, one of the things that we love to ask people, and especially in a pandemic time, is as you cast your eye over the next 6 months to 12 months, what are you most excited about? What's the thing that gets you jumping out of bed in the morning to get you over to your laptop? And maybe further afield as the pandemic lessens.
Well, I think as you've learned in this short time that we've been together, I'll certainly not tell you one thing. If you can say something in 50 words instead of 5 words, say it in 50 words is always my motto. So,
go for it.
I knew I liked you.
So, work-wise, I think it's pretty obvious. We're building a distillery. What's not to love? I mean, super exciting time for us. We're still doing design work. The next stages for me is going through that process of looking at, pumps and valves and, the not glamour side of it. But we're still looking at sort of some of the sort of basic design stuff, which is really, really interesting. And myself and Ollie and Rajbir and the engineering team and our civils guys, we have weekly meetings where we're going through all the sort of stuff that we still need to cover off to build the distillery. And there's just so much to do there that's really, really interesting and to think about sort of what we're going to have in a couple of years' time. Mm-hmm. From a personal point of view, just getting off the island. be quite nice. Since February 2019, I was away. I went to a couple of gigs. I went to see a band called Pete and Diesel, who are from the Western Isles, with some friends in Glasgow at the Barrowlands. Brilliant gig. A few of us went to Poland then for a few days, came back, went to some other gigs. And early in the year, there's a big festival called Celtic Connections in Glasgow, which is fantastic. And a lot of Americana bands and, people from all over the world that are influenced, or their music is influenced by Scottish music. So we did that, and then we have literally been in lockdown ever since then. I have been to London once to meet with Sikander and Ollie and the guys down there about a month or so ago, and I don't have any plans really to leave Islay until the new year now, sort of hunker down for the winter. The freezer's full, so we should be good to get through the winter. But I think one of the things that I'm super excited about is getting to go around all the new distilleries. I am just unbelievably excited to do that. And I think one of the nice things that I've managed to do, although it's been in the line of work, but it's felt like it's been for myself, has been catching up with people, because we are looking for advice and friendly help, and the industry is such an amazing place. And also it is littered with people that I've worked with previously as well. So I have been having the most amazing conversations with guys who've previously worked in Diageo or other areas of the business that I know them from. And I'm asking them about, what are you guys doing with new technology? What are you doing with new processes? Where are we as an industry with sustainability? What do we think the future fuels and energy sources are going to be? And really sort of spending a lot of time talking to people. And it has been absolutely a pleasure getting back in touch with people again and sort of, trying to sort of build up that network that we will need. And there is a genuine network of people in the whisky industry in Scotland, and they are more than happy to help each other. And, I'm lucky that a lot of the contractors that I know that we're going to end up using in the project are people that I've worked with before as well. And people are always really happy to give advice and lend a hand. And, there's a lot of stuff that, out with the sort of, everything when you work for a big industry, a big company is all there for you. There is an engineering department, there is a process support department, there is a maturation department, so it's sort of getting out there and talking to people. But a lot of these people I already, are really good friends with, and sort of getting back in touch with them and setting plans in place to go and visit them next year. That is absolutely, buying new whiskies, tasting new whiskies, thinking to myself, how did they do that? And having those conversations, and then getting to a place where I'm hoping, early next year, springtime, I'm going to do a huge tour of Scotland, and go and visit all these people and say thanks to them, go and see all the new distilleries that have started up, and sort of making sure that we're part of that industry and that network of people that are out there. We might not have a distillery yet, but we're going to have one really soon, and I think it's really important that we sort of, put ourselves out there. Yeah, Elixir Distillers have, been an independent bottler for quite some time, but we're moving into a different place now, and it's really good to have that network. And, we're just really interested in what other people are doing as well, and just sort of taking that in as part of our own education and is experience that we have, and wanting to sort of share that with other people as well. So yeah, that's what I want to do, is a massive tour of distilleries.
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it, and it's great because I'm tasting new whiskies all the time, and I'm thinking I'm definitely going to go and see them. So I'm sort of starting this list. I'll get a map on the wall soon enough, and I'll start sort of thinking about my road trip. And I've already had some friends that are going to be, can I join you for that bit, or what, are you going to go to that distillery? So so I think we'll probably do some sort of freedom, some sort of freedom tour.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Freedom!
Go out and about.
Driving through the Trossachs.
Just see people, It's lovely. I've had amazing conversations and Zoom calls and phone calls with, old friends and people in the industry. And, when the pandemic was, very early on, we were all going on to tastings, and you were still getting to see people. It was lovely, but it's not the same. So it'll be really nice to sort of go out and do that again.
Well, I hope the day's here sooner rather than later, but having that on your calendar will give you something to look forward to during the darker months.
Yeah.
I would say the windier and wetter months, but it is Islay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just the winter. That's that. But as I go though through the winter, I will persevere with tasting new whiskies just so I can keep building that list of places to go to.
Good on you.
It's the hard work, but I'm glad you're up for it.
Absolutely.
To make up for all the spreadsheets.
yeah, absolutely. I'll need to get shelves like you guys have got so that when I've had enough of writing those risk assessments, I can just have a little tipple to get me through the afternoon.
That's it. A wee lie down with a wee dram.
When Ollie brings you around to the U.S., you make sure we hit Guilford, Connecticut, which is the most important whiskey market in all of the United States.
I'm writing that down, Joshua. I'm actually writing that down so I can add it to my list. He's coming up here. Ollie's coming up in a couple of days' time, and I've got a lot of time with him next week, so I'm just going to make sure that comes up. In fact, I'll go and add it to the agenda for the visit. That's great. Thank you for
that. This has been brilliant.
Thank you so much. Really fun.
Good. Yeah,
this is how people described you to us, and what a lot of fun. I could see us having a good dram on Islay of an evening and sharing a few stories.
That's fine. Well, I'll keep some of that mouse-nibbled Lagavulin for you, and hopefully we'll have some new spirit as well from our distillery as well for the next time that you guys are hopefully coming across. If it's not sooner than that.
Oh yes. Yeah. Oh, early next year, we're coming on your tour with you. It's going to be fun.
Perfect. We could do like a convoy system. It will be absolutely brilliant.
Right,
we can all have. What would your name be if you were on a convoy? That's what you need to think about before you come across next year.
I'm already Jason 3 names, so I'd be 3 names for the convoy.
Yeah, and I'm the whiskey cherub. So there you go.
The whiskey cherub.
Whiskey whippet these days, I think.
Whiskey whippet.
He's now the whiskey whippet, but he used to be the whiskey cherub.
Very good. Well, there we go. Well, that's it. I'll have to have a think about mine. I'm not really sure.
I was going to say, we don't know yours yet.
It sounds like you said a lot of people spoke about me before we did this. So maybe you would be better to use some of those descriptions. Or is that?
It's too long a descriptor. Yeah. It's too long.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Very good.
All right.
Well, thanks again, Georgie.
Very welcome. And it was lovely speaking to you guys.
You got us into the interview asking me what my takeaway was. What was your big takeaway from the conversation?
Obviously, that Georgie Crawford is really cool and somebody we could dram with really easily. Mm-hmm. But on the more professional side of things, the Elixir Distillers project is in incredibly safe hands.
I really liked hearing her talk about the fact that this is going to be a 3-floor distillery. They're going to have their own maltings. And yes, she's managed a distillery before, but now she's got this added wrinkle of managing a distillery that is going to have its own maltings.
Yeah.
And I think that is going to be really a really interesting wrinkle to the overall production. It's a larger project than she's dealt with previously, and given her time at some of the other distilleries that she's had prior to Lagavulin. And if there's any one person that is qualified for this job, it is definitely Georgie. And the things that she's going to have to learn on the job, I think she's going to have a blast learning on the job. And then she'll be a mentor to people, to the generations behind her. So yeah, I'm excited for her. I'm excited for our friends Ollie and Sukhinder and the rest of the team at Elixir. And rewinding the clock back to 2005, and there was that excitement of, look at what Kilchoman's going to be doing. And then you rewind the clock back to 2016 and 17 and 18, and you see what Ardnahoe is doing. And now we get to watch it again, where you see this birth of a distillery. And that's all exciting. And I talk about this all of the time in tastings where, maybe I'm pouring a single malts of Scotland and say, here's a Glenmurray. That distillery is built in 1897. We didn't have the luxury of being excited about that distillery's birth and following its growth. But yet here are 3 examples on Islay where we can say we have been around to watch that distilleries build and watch them evolve as a distillery. And that is just exciting. It's exciting to me, and I'm excited to see Georgie shape that growth with this new distillery.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said there, right down to we're living history. And one of the things we've been saying for a couple of months now about this burgeoning American single malt whiskey category, here we are, living history. When you were out on your recent trip that we discussed in the beginning here, last week I got to revisit our friends at Virginia Distillery Company.
Yeah. Yep.
Here we are with a distillery that's, 2015 for the beginnings of that. And you're just in the beginning of a movement, the beginning of a distillery. You get to see things up close that 100 years from now, 150 years ago, will be past history. We're living it right now. Very exciting. Really wonderful.
Yeah. It's nice to be on the sidelines and in some cases be a small part of that too. That history. Again, thinking back to Kilhome and us being able to bottle a cask from them. There's a little bit of history there. It's nice to not just be on the sidelines, but to have our toes dipped into some of that history. On a
just remember, there are no small parts, only small people.
I thought you were going to say small penises.
Always the penis with you.
Extra, extra! Read all about it. Life story of Playboy Penny. Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it. Me and that Playboy in trouble.
We've been saying it for a while now, but US retail release number 8 is here, making its way around stores. Go search it out. Elijah's been doing his best to get eyeballs on it, get taste buds on it. Off to a tremendous start. Jess has been busy with ROW number 3. Same thing, trying to get it out to stores. She talked about it hopefully being in the UK by the end of November. Okay. Still on course with that.
Good.
Other markets are dealing with global logistics to get it there. Jess is doing her best. The Single Cask Nation Online, we sold 4 casks. We've still got some Beanley and some Crofton Gea on the website. We never get to say
How
it.
is that?
Right?
How is that even
right?
possible? But yeah, hey-ho.
Limiting it to 1 bottle per person really helps control sales. Here we are in the busy OND and we're saying, nope, just 1 bottle for you. Nope, just 1 bottle for you. And so let everybody get a chance. We are about to circle back there. Once shipping gets started proper, we'll circle back to some rebuys on that, allow people to do that. But it's exciting to be able to say there's a couple of bottles in the store. But then the reason that I wanted to actually bring up any of this in the news segment is because Elijah and I were having a text conversation the other day. And I think this is worth bringing up. You and I have talked about this on the podcast, that it's a transparent industry podcast. We talk about the company. We talk about the business. Really good point comes up here. So we have released, and I'm opening the text exchange here. We have released what we have internally called Wolf Island.
Yes.
It's the Water of Life Film Collaborative Island Single Malt. And Elijah messaged me the other day and it said, I've got a store owner asking how they should list this bottling.
Okay.
And as much as we refer to it internally as Wolf Island.
Yeah.
There's nothing on the label that says anything Wolf Island. In fact, there's a sheep on the label, right? With this wonderful boom mic above it. I absolutely love the label. But we've never once called it Sheep Island. We've called it Wolf Island. Mm-hmm. In the back of my head, I've enjoyed the idea of a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of what I've been riffing off.
Same.
But, right. So Elijah is asking, okay, where do we go with this? What's the name of this bottle? And so I texted him and I said, here's the name of this bottle. Single Cask Nation, Water of Life Film Collaborative, Undisclosed Island Small Batch. That's the name of this bottle, right? That's the name of it. That's what it is, right? But, why not use SCN Wolf Collaboration in shorthand, right?
Huh.
Right? And so as much as it pains me to move away from Wolf Island and the imagery that casts, I think if consumers are looking for it, and we've got 1,600 bottles going to retail stores across the United States, if you are a consumer who is looking for it, you're going to want to look for SCN Wolf Collaboration.
Agreed. However, if that doesn't work, then ask for Wolf Island. And the reason I say this is you and I, and Jess and Elijah from the beginning have been calling it Wolf Island. And so has Impex and our POS or point of sale material, our sales sheets call it Wolf Island. And so I think that this is a term that has caught on. So caught on with some, maybe caught on with many. So try the Single Cask Nation Wolf Collaborative bottling. And if that doesn't work, try Wolf Island. Yeah, it's a really good point.
And so how does one get around it? So that's right. So here's the honest part of this, right? When it comes to Ardbeg Black with 3 A's in the black, I hate that. I hate that name.
And so much better than 3 K's, though. I mean, can we agree on that?
100%. I'm on board. But whenever you enter it into a search engine, you have to get the correct number of A's to get a result to come up.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Right? It's got a name, but boy, does that confuse things. Then it got me thinking, right? There's then the Ardbeg, which was the pirate release for Mickey Heads leaving Ardbeg and ultimately retiring. But that, I think, had 7 R's in it. And you had to spell it with all the R's to get results on it. And then, whether Billy, Dr. Bill Lumsden likes it or not, Scorch. You know how to spell it. Mm-hmm. You know how many letters are in it and all the right number of letters. Scorch, boom, you just get.
Yeah, but you have to set your computer on fire to get the proper. You have to set it. It's like, that one.
So there's value in a name, and so I know that Elijah, in terms of going into retail and connecting consumers with retailers, there's value in names, and we've always relied on, we're Single Cask Nation, and we've had a distillery name, or we've had Undisclosed Islay, which has posed its own problems as well. But here we are with this big collaborative project that we're now kind of, how do we communicate that? And maybe it would have been as easy as putting Wolf Island on the label as we were busy using it internally.
So we should have listed on the label what we've been calling it from the beginning. Is that what you're saying?
Radical notion.
Well, yeah.
I tell you what, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fantastic bottling. It's going over so well.
I have had people come up to me or reach out to me on Facebook saying, I saw Elijah at the Whiskey and Barrel Night in L.A. Holy crap, is that Wolf Island bottling good? Or holy crap, was that Sheep Label bottling good? And, the general consensus is the Vino seal that's on top. Everybody calls it a glass cork, but, they're saying the bottle doesn't seem to hold the glass cork very well, meaning you don't put the cork back on because you're too busy pouring it for your friends and just having a good time. And we talk about this. There's some whiskeys that are session whiskeys where you bring friends over, you pour it for everybody on the Friday, and you have them over again maybe, and by the Monday you're recycling the bottle because it's just a sharing whiskey.
Well, and that was something that you and I clearly discussed internally. We may very well have brought it up on this podcast. I know that I brought it up with Greg on his podcast, Big Man We Dram. But in the idea of putting that together, when you're collaborating with a film, you're going to get lovers of a film coming out in search of this bottling, reaching for this, asking for it in a store. And the question at that point becomes, when they open it, what's their experience? What are they getting here? And so the fact that it worked so well at 48.8, a strength that we have never done before. It's not a cask strength product or project. What does that do for flavor? What does that do for accessibility? What does it do for drinkability? And I think it becomes a very sessionable dram that if you're sitting watching the Water of Life film, you can pour one, maybe two. Well, the movie's still going. Why not a third? Right?
So long as you're home or you have an Uber.
Hashtag, please drink a full bottle responsibly. And so it really does become, for me, that experience and that quality of spirit, and what it says about the collaboration with Greg and Trevor and Alphonse and the team. There's so much wrapped up in it, and I want the consumer to enjoy all aspects of that. And I'm really overjoyed that early reports are people are doing just that, discovering just that.
Yep. Yeah, they're absolutely loving it. So that's very encouraging. And that's all I have to say about that one. Was there any other news we needed to cover?
I was going to ask you, given that you've been out and about and doing some Single Cask Nation tastings in retail stores, and you mentioned earlier doing warehouse liquors, anything catch your eye in our own kind of retail out and about in the world?
People cannot seem to get enough of our 10-year-old Blair Athol, the second fill PX. And it's been one of these whiskeys where people have even said, and I loved this so much, because not everybody knows Blair Athol, but they know Rosebank, and people have said that this has the delicate quality that I think of when I've had some Rosebanks, earlier on, but then there's the heft from the sherry cask. And their point was, this is such a well-composed whiskey. It's so balanced. It's for a 10-year-old whiskey. And I, that's one bit I usually don't like hearing, for a such and such age.
Yeah.
But,
I've
whatever.
never been a fan either.
Yeah. But, their point is, it's doing a lot of things. It's ticking a lot of boxes. And normally you'd need a master blender to create this wonderfully balanced whiskey that's both light and heavy and unctuous and crisp and and they're falling in love with it, and so that's been a takeaway for me. Of course I'm with the M&H guys, so we're talking about the SCN M&H bottlings, and those have been that's been well received. And there's one other one, our Linkwood. Oh my gosh. it's when people start coming to me and pitching a line to me that I've never pitched to them before, but it's my line. You know, we're you know, our thing about our linkwood was that if you taste a linkwood from Gordon MacPhail, or you taste it through Flora and Fauna, or any other independent bottler, they're highlighting how great that whiskey is in an active cask. Mm-hmm. And we're highlighting how great the whiskey is in an inactive cask. So you could see the fruity side of linkwood. And their point is, I've never tasted a linkwood like this. I've never had the chance to experience linkwood in this way. And people are saying, thank you. That is cool.
That's wonderful to hear. The linkwood love and the Blair Athol love, and not to speak out of school, but I'm watching the calendar. You and I are closing in on a recording of our year in review. Mm-hmm. And I've been thinking about some bottlings that we will be discussing in that episode. And I'm very happy to hear what you're saying right now. I'll throw this on the end of the news segment here. Is Elijah just did a banter about the barrel with Patrick from the Wine Exchange.
Oh, Wine Exchange, yeah. Yep.
They have the first publicly released single cask nation blended Scotch. Single cask.
The Terence, yeah.
So if you're looking for something exciting, look them up. They do not ship outside the state of California, but I'm sure you've got friends in California. I'm positive. And then as we talk linkwood, Grombeck up at Barrel Thief in Seattle, who has a banter about the barrel with Elijah as well, talks about his linkwood selection and what he's selling just at Barrel Thief. Yeah. That's well searching out as well. That's well worth searching out as well. And again, he's not shipping anywhere really, but I'm sure you've got friends in Seattle. I'm positive. I know you.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. Yes,
You're good
you
people.
in the car. You've got a friend in Seattle.
You got a friend in
Seattle.
So anyway, There you go. That's the news. Tons of things. You know, we've spent so many months watching this global supply chain and how we're going to get everything out of Scotland and, you know, even into England, for crying out loud, and across into Europe and over into the US and Canada. You know, the support in Canada is absolutely off the chain right now. Like, it's brilliant seeing so much movement on so many projects we've been sitting on for a couple of months and a few months in some cases. Mm-hmm. So, and where is our mind? It's sitting in 2022, working out. What does the first week of January look like? What does the rest of January look like? What does February look like? It never ends. It's always go, go, go.
It's funny you're talking about January and February. All I'm thinking about is next October, November, December, because there are big things happening. Or there are the big things that need to happen, and there's so many things that we need to be doing to ensure that these big things happen towards the end of next year.
100%. Well, I am shuffling the papers on my desk, and I'm proud to say this has been the news.
Out of the frying pan and into the fire, Jason. We're leaving news, and now we're gonna go to emails. And actually, just so you're aware, Jason, and just so our listeners are aware, we're gonna start putting a pause on emails because we're now in the mode of collecting emails for our annual mailbag episode, which is going to happen sometime in February. And I understand it's the middle of November, but we all know February is going to come friggin' quick.
How did we just close out the news segment? Our minds are in 2022. We're in February 2022. You got to plan this far ahead if it's going to work at the right time. So yeah, you're spot on. We're looking at the mailbag episode somewhere around Valentine's Day, 2022.
So what I'm about to read actually didn't come in email. This was an Instagram message, and this came from a listener that our listeners have heard before, Balancer, a.k.a. Anthony Riviera. Or should I say Anthony Riviera, a.k.a. Balancer?
Isn't it Rivera?
Anthony Rivera.
Yeah, you're saying Riviera.
I said Rivera.
You said Riviera 3 times.
You said Riviera.
I don't know what's happening right now, but if you could pronounce it correctly, we'll continue.
All right. Anthony, I apologize if I said Riviera. I meant Rivera. We know you by Balancer, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, I only call them the French for short.
The French? Oh, the French Riviera. So he sent an Instagrammatical message, and speaking of grammatical, and he says, I don't know if you get requests for the podcast, but you are now.
Oh.
I'm curious if you and Jason have sampled any single malt finished in a tequila cask. I don't see it being complimentary in any way to single malt, but I do trust both your palates. As you may have assumed, I'm not a tequila fan. I am, though, interested in things that are new to me in the world of whiskey. I've not seen any tequila-finished whiskey on the shelves yet. I was hoping you could briefly discuss tequila cask in the beginning or the end of a podcast. Curious on who's experimenting with these casks. Do you like it? What's in the future? Popular or a dud? When can we see major brands having these on the shelves? I've seen a few in publications, but none on a shelf. And, I know I can think instantly of a release you and I have had, and that was from Westland. That was their celebration, or Celebrious. That was it. It was their Celebrious cask. Do you remember with their April Fools?
Yeah.
And that was finished in a tequila cask.
Certainly worked. Do you remember their other April Fools where they released tequila?
Yeah. But that wasn't that an agave spirit. That was an actual agave spirit. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah, that jumped to mind. But yeah, the Celebrious, and then of course, Kilchoman comes to mind. They've done the mezcal cask that was released.
Tequila cask is coming.
Okay, it's coming. That was my follow-up. Thank you.
And let me add on to that, right? Because I've been on the tasting panel to some of these single casks coming into the U.S. from Kilchoman, and I'm going to tell you a little story that I found somewhat intriguing. So there's a mezcal cask that came in, and I'm going to lump mezcal and tequila into the same category because, tequila is basically a subset of mezcal, right? It's an agave spirit, so let's lump it in together. Why not? So when we got the initial samples, we got a few tequila cask ones and a few mezcal cask ones. And I didn't particularly love the tequila casks. I didn't dislike them, but I thought the mezcal ones had the whiskey coming into its own a bit more. And the one that we approved, I remember really liking a lot. And I said, but it seems to kind of take the whiskey out of the realm of what Kilchoman is, or the things that I love about Kilchoman. I still like it, but it doesn't seem like a very Kilchoman-y Kilchoman. But here's the interesting thing. That cask was maybe bottled a month, maybe 2 months after the selection. And I recently tasted it while I was in Chicago. And I've got to tell you, that's one of the finer Kilchoman single casks I've had in a while. All of a sudden, Kilchoman came back. And what the mezcal was doing, rather than confusing the palate with a different type of smoke, what it seemed to do was amplify or add this wonderful orchard fruit note. It was all red apples on the palate. But it was red apples with what we like about Kilchoman, with that, white chocolate fattiness and some of that citrus and some of the floral notes going on. And so it makes me think that it could work. From the standpoint of, and we've talked about this before, aging not being linear, right?
100%.
It's not going to go from not great to getting better to great. It's going to go from maybe that's great to not being great to being okay to being great.
Yep.
And it's going to go up and down.
Yep.
And so I don't think that we can discount necessarily any one cask, but I think whether it's Kilchoman, whether it's Westland, whether it's Diageo, I think you're going to see Diageo releasing a fair bit of tequila matured whiskey because they own tequila distilleries. I think similar to us experiencing the evolution of a distillery and seeing how their whiskeys progress, we're going to see the evolution of whiskeys being matured in tequila casks and mezcal casks, and seeing, where the sweet spot is for that. And, my guess is we understand what a sherry cask finish does. We understand what full maturation sherry does. We understand what a Madeira finish and full Madeira maturation does. We're only now learning what a tequila finish can do or what a mezcal finish can do. And it's just going to be us watching that evolution and getting an understanding of what's going to be best for that distillate.
Do you think, given the way you start talking about Kilchoman there, do you think it needs to be smoke in the spirit to work with smoke in the mezcal? Or do you think there might be room for a non-smoked spirit to grow within the smoke of the mezcal? Would that be something you'd be paying attention to as we go on this journey?
Oh, 100%. So this was one of my concerns with that Kilchoman mezcal cask. Initially, I was concerned that the peatiness was fighting with the smokiness, that the two weren't gelling. They were both present, and I thought that was fun. Like, I knew I would open my wallet for it, right? And that is the final test to selecting a cask. Am I going to open my wallet for it? So I knew that I was going to do that. But I thought people would be having a conversation about perhaps the peat fighting with or being side by side with the smoke from the mezcal cask. And in the end, the two really gelled in an absolutely beautiful way. I think a non-peated spirit in a mezcal cask can be as wonderful as, what Penderyn is doing for their Celt and peated, or what Balvenie does with their peated cask. You're going to see that smoke being put upon the malt in a complementary way. It's a matter of, what's the Goldilocks zone for, harvesting that cask for bottling. And I just think it's going to be a bit of a learning curve.
But to bring this answer full circle here, it's interesting that you led with Celebrius from Westland with the tequila finishing on that April Fool's release that they always have a lot of fun with. Mm-hmm. But you're seeing Diageo and Chivas and Dewar's using tequila finishing and cask and mezcal cask finishing in blended products. And it's always interesting for me when I hear this question, my mind immediately goes to single casks. Who's putting out the single casks? And what's happening with the mezcal and the tequila in that instance? But the thought that this could come back to blending and some finishing going on there, an additional little note. As a blender, you're always just looking for what additional notes can you introduce to the experience.
Yeah, I mean, there are really three ways you can look at this. You can look at it as single casks. You can look at it as a general single malt release. Or you can look at it from a blended perspective, right? I think blenders, whether you're Dewar's or you're Johnny Walker or your Chivas, you have the freedom to create something that allows you to take you out of your standard flavor profile because you already have things to delineate that. Right? Your Johnny Red is going to taste one way, your Johnny Black is going to taste another way, and the story goes on. And so you don't need to say, here's Johnny Black with a tequila finish. You create a tequila finished Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
That becomes its own thing. But when you apply it to a single malt, then that becomes different because you have a very specific distillery character that you are affecting. And with a blend, you don't have a distillery character. You have different releases that are going to have different styles.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing I think they need to be careful of, to bring this also back to the gentleman you were talking about earlier at your kosher festival there, they just have to be careful, because I know that when you put whiskey into a tequila cask, it becomes tequila. So, that's going to affect marketing, I think, and how that gets presented. But other than that, I think we're golden here.
Oh, I wanted to ask him. Firstly, that was excellent. Secondly, I wanted to ask, that was really good. Wonderful callback. I wanted to, I don't know if our listeners fully appreciate how effortless that callback was. But I wanted to ask this guy, like, okay, when you put wine into a cask, does that become whiskey? Like,
well, my concern is he would say yes. That would be the concern there.
That is my concern, dude.
Yeah. Wow. This has been excellent. Balancer, thanks ever so much for the question. Joshua, I know you always like to remind the listener how to reach out, but also with a focus on sending in an email for the mailbag episode.
Right. So please do send us emails, especially with the mailbag episode in mind, because I want to have the best mailbag episode we've ever had.
The best. That's how we measure ourselves. Has this latest one been the best? If the answer is no, we've failed.
Then we failed. And like Jason, you had said in our previous episode or the one before that, who knows?
Some point in the past.
Ask us a whiskey question. Ask us a personal question. Ask us anything you would like, and we will likely answer it. And if we don't answer it, well, then we didn't.
You crossed the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You crossed the line.
Yeah.
Over this line, you do not. And by the way, please, proper nomenclature.
Yeah, just mark it down.
Yeah, just mark it.
Just mark it down.
Over the line. Anyway, so if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us. Questions at onenationunderwhiskey.com. That's our email address. Hey, if you want to reach out to us, info@singlecasknation.com. I guess you could do that too if you want. You could do what our friend Anthony Riviera, Anthony the French Riviera.
The French.
Just call him the French. Oh, there you go. You could do what the French does, what the French do, and just Instagram us if you'd like. And you could reach out to us via Facebook. Send us a Facebook message like Ian Bruce does, and the Pluralized Mayors and some others. Just go to the Facebook search bar, look for One Nation Under Whiskey, and you'll find us there. Just send us a message. And
P.O. Box?
Oh, yep, P.O. Box 335, Guilford, Connecticut, 06437. If you want to send us a postcard like Paul Marco has, you could send us gifts like David Feldner did, which was wonderful, like Travis Williams did.
Still sits on my desk. Both those chaps' gifts still sit on my desk. And I've still got. I know I don't have the hair for it anymore, but I've got Vadim's wizard's hat. Is just down to my side here. It's a bottle topper for me.
It's sitting on top of one of my Aberlour bottles. Listen, the only thing that we don't accept are flaming bags of poop. So do not send flaming bags of poop to our P.O. Box.
That's how you lose a P.O. Box.
But the box is really P.O.
P.U.
Oh, P.U. That's right. No one says P.O. It says P.U.
P.O. Is that us?
That's us, Jason. Listeners, Jason, everybody, Thank you so much. It's been a blast. It's been a pleasure. Until the next time.
Speaking of Travis Williams, I will pick up his 2 Glencairns here. And I will say, cheers, Joshua. Cheers, listeners. Cheers, Travis Williams.
It is exciting, but it's an interesting point, too, that you've got Port Ellen that is about
I'm going
to
to
open.
interrupt here. You sound like you're coming through your AirPod mic rather than your Rode.
I should be coming through my AirPod mic rather than my Rode.
That does make sense. Just your voice has completely changed. And are you sure you're coming through your AirPod and not through your...
So,
that just changed it.
Well, so part of it is... I'm going to have some editing to do because I've got a vacuum cleaner going on downstairs. Okay. So I think that the vacuum alongside my voice is affecting how you're hearing it come through.
So hopefully on your
AirPods.
side it might not be.
Nothing has changed.
Yeah. So it's not coming through your laptop mic or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
No,
cool.
like
I'm
that.
sorry to interrupt your question.
I'm going to
but
take a drink while we're doing that.
Wow, that is a huge...
I think you'll find it's my Metallica glass.
That's
all
Lagavulin.
Metallica glass of Lagavulin.
Yes, and beer for all. Oh, look at that.
We went to
Beer
see them a
for
couple
all.
of years ago at Twickenham,
That's perfect.
and that was the reusable cups you could get for beer. And I was like, I'm taking this home with me. So we've got a collection of Metallica cups. I was like,
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. I'm going to age myself. The last time I saw them was
there you go.
1991.
But you know what us whiskey people are like?
First time I saw them was
we don't go
86.
anywhere and not expect to get a free glass at the end of it.
So, what was I saying? Oh, right, yeah. So